We read from St Mark's Gospel, chapter 9, beginning to read at verse 2. After 6 days, Jesus took Peter, James, and John with him and led them up a high mountain, where they were all alone. There he was transfigured before them. His clothes became dazzling white, whiter than anyone in the world could bleach them. And there appeared before them Elijah and Moses, who were talking with Jesus. Peter said to Jesus, "Rabbi, it is good for us to be here. Let us put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." He did not know what to say, they were so frightened. Then a cloud appeared and covered them, and a voice came from the cloud, "This is my Son, whom I love. Listen to him." Suddenly, when they looked round, they no longer saw anyone with them except Jesus. May God help us to understand his word. Amen. Jesus takes his 3 closest disciples, Peter, James, and John, with him up a mountain. For Mark's readers, this would have called to mind the passage in Exodus chapter 34, verse 16, where Moses spent 6 days on the mountain before God called to him out of the cloud. Moses was accompanied only by his faithful servant Joshua, who became his successor. In the Gospels, Peter, James, and John are seen as Jesus' closest followers, and they become the paramount leaders in the earliest church. The mountain, wherever it was, is seen as the new Sinai, where the full revelation of the Messiah, Jesus, is given, instead of the law. What actually happened? We don't know. It could have been some sort of collective vision. The imagery, mountain, Moses, Elijah, white garments, is composed of traditional pictures from the Old Testament which would have resonated with the disciples and their first readers. Moses and Elijah were both known to have been close to God and to have departed life in strange ways. Their bodies were never found. Moses was the lawgiver, Elijah the first of the prophets. So together they represented the whole witness of the Hebrew Scriptures, pointing towards Jesus as their fulfillment. The cloud overshadowing them is reminiscent of the events of Mount Sinai, where the law appears to have been given in the context of a volcanic eruption. To the biblical writers, especially in the Hebrew Scriptures, a cloud usually signified God's presence. The Jewish Feast of Tabernacles, where they all lived in booths for a period to remind them of Israel's wandering in the wilderness, was the time when they remembered and celebrated the giving of the law on Mount Sinai. So Peter suggests building booths for Moses, Elijah, and Jesus, who are obviously the important people. But Peter had not quite understood what God wanted to say. So the voice from the cloud corrects his understanding. "This is my Son, whom I love. Listen to him." "This is my son" recalls Psalm 2 verse 7, where God says to the king, "You are my son, this day have I begotten you." This verse, originally addressed to the king of Judah, was read by early Christians as referring to Jesus. "Whom I love" recalls the oracle about the servant of God found in the book of the prophet Isaiah. "Here is my servant, whom I uphold, my chosen one, in whom I delight." The voice from the cloud uses the word beloved instead of chosen, but the two words are close in meaning. This verse was also interpreted by early Christians as referring to Jesus, and the two verses are also combined in the account of Jesus' baptism as well as in this story. There, God affirms Jesus' ministry at its beginning. Now he reaffirms it as it draws to its close, just after Jesus has announced to his disciples that he must be crucified. The words of God's voice from the cloud are the purpose of the whole story. The disciples had been questioning Jesus' insistence that he had to go the way of the cross, as we see towards the end of chapter 8 of Mark's Gospel. And God's voice from the cloud emphasizes who Jesus is and God's approval of him. Then come the words, "Listen to him." Do we, like the disciples, question Jesus and argue with him about how things are and how they should be? God says to us, as he said to those disciples, "This is my son, whom I love. Listen to him."